He let her go on a Wednesday morning, without ceremony and without looking up from his desk. Roman Beckett signed 3 documents while she stood across the mahogany surface from him, waiting. He slid a white envelope toward her without a word, then turned back to his screen. The gesture said everything his voice didn't bother to. "You're finished here. Collect your things." To Roman, Evie Marsh had been the woman who kept the building running, the one who made the lights come on at the right temperature and the right hour, who knew which elevator to hold and which conference rooms were haunted by bad acoustics. Efficient, quiet, replaceable. He was wrong on every count. He just didn't know it yet. 3 days later, sitting in the low-lit security room beneath his Bay Street tower, with Hugh Larkin's hand clenched on the back of his chair, Roman Beckett watched 17 minutes of recovered footage and forgot how to breathe. The woman he had dismissed for keeping him waiting had spent those 17 minutes ensuring he walked out of that building alive. Roman ran the 42nd floor of the Beckett Group Tower at King and Bay. 22,000 square feet of glass and stone overlooking Toronto's financial district like a throne above a circuit board. He controlled development corridors from the waterfront to the 401. He held construction bonds, rezoning approvals, city council relationships that had taken 2 decades and 1 very expensive personal reputation to build. He was, depending on who you asked, the most powerful private developer in Ontario or the most dangerous one. In a world composed entirely of leverage, volume, and strategy, the only frictionless surface in his operation was the property services desk on the 38th floor, where Evie Marsh had worked for the past 2 years. If Roman had been asked to describe her, he would have struggled past the basics. She was mid to late 20s, he thought. She wore plain clothes, high-necked blouses in charcoal or stone, flat-heeled shoes that made no sound on the polished concrete floors. Her hair was dark, usually pulled back. She wore no perfume. She carried a slim black binder instead of a handbag. She was the person you called when a lease negotiation needed routing, when a contractor went silent, when a VIP was arriving and the service elevator needed to be held. She answered every message within 4 minutes. She never took a full lunch hour. She solved problems before Roman knew they existed. He liked her because he didn't have to think about her. She was infrastructure. You needed the building to function. It functioned. Done. Until the Wednesday with Fletcher Crane. Fletcher Crane was a problem in the shape of a man. He ran Crane Capital out of a glass box in Yorkville. Aggressive acquisitions, suspicious financing structures, and a habit of underbidding city contracts and then running them into the ground for insurance payouts. Roman had been keeping him at arm's length for years. But Crane's latest move was a proposal to co-develop the Portlands, a 110-acre waterfront parcel that Roman had been positioning to acquire outright for 18 months. Crane had muscled in with a Montreal financing partner, and today's meeting was supposed to end with Roman signing the Portlands out of Crane's reach entirely. A clean, solo acquisition. Signed, sealed, gone. The boardroom on 42 smelled of good coffee and controlled tension. Roman sat at the head of the table across from André Pelletier, the Montreal developer, while 2 lawyers from Bay Street firms reviewed the final annex. He needed 3 printed copies of the clause addendum. He needed them in the next 4 minutes. He pressed the intercom. "Evie, bring the addendum documents to 42. 3 sets." Nothing. He pressed it again. "Evie." Silence. Pelletier glanced at his watch. His lawyer capped his pen. Roman felt the first cold thread of something he didn't allow himself to feel in boardrooms. Exposure. In 17 years of deal-making, his office had never dropped a document. The machine of his operation did not produce silences. 11 minutes passed. Then 14. Pelletier's lawyer excused himself to take a call. On minute 17, the boardroom door opened. Evie walked in carrying 3 document folders. Her hair was slightly looser than it had been that morning. Not disheveled, but no longer quite perfect. Her blouse was buttoned to the throat, and something about the way she was breathing told Roman it cost her effort to keep it level. There was no tremor in her hands, no apology forming on her face. "The addendum documents, Mr. Beckett," she said. She placed a folder in front of him, one before Pelletier, one before the lead lawyer. She stepped back. "Will you need anything else?" He looked at her. His voice was quiet, the kind of quiet that his executive team had learned to treat as a warning signal. "No, thank you." She nodded and left. The deal closed 20 minutes later. But when Pelletier was gone and the lawyers had filed out, Roman remained at the table. He thought about the 17 minutes. He thought about the crack it had opened in a room where he could not afford cracks. He stood up and straightened his cuffs. The decision arrived the way his decisions always did, cleanly, without ceremony. He found her at her desk finishing an email. 17 minutes, he said, no preamble. She didn't look up immediately. When she did, her expression was even. Yes. Pelletier's counsel was going to walk. That clause addendum is the entire structural spine of the acquisition. He let the silence hold. Why were you not at your desk? There was an issue in the service corridor that required my attention. An issue. He repeated the word the way a man might repeat something he'd found on the floor. What kind of issue takes 17 minutes and keeps you from answering an intercom? An unforeseen one, she said. I apologize for the disruption to the meeting. No panic, no plea for understanding. He opened the center drawer of his desk, withdrew an envelope and set it on the surface between them. Inside was a check, 2 months' salary plus accrued leave. This covers your notice period, he said. Leave your building access card with Hugh on your way out. She looked at the envelope. Then she looked at him. Understood, Mr. Beckett. She picked up the envelope, stood and left. Roman stood at his window and watched the city below him. He felt something he couldn't name. Not guilt, because he didn't indulge guilt, but displacement, as though a load-bearing wall had quietly been removed somewhere in the building below him, and no one had noticed yet. Evie walked back to her desk on 38 and opened the bottom cabinet. She pulled out a flat-packed cardboard box and assembled it with 4 precise folds. Into it went a spare umbrella, a transit card, 2 mechanical pencils. She didn't have photographs. She had never put photographs on her desk. The surface was as clean and institutional as it had been the day she arrived. She paused at the locked filing drawer, the bottom right one. Her thumb rested on the keyhole for a moment. She decided to leave it. Hugh Larkin walked past as she was lifting the box. He was 6 feet of scar tissue and institutional loyalty, ex-army, 15 years with the Beckett Group, the kind of man who broke bones professionally and apologized about it afterward. He stopped when he saw the box. Moving offices? Moving on, she said. He looked at Roman's closed suite door. Something moved across his face that wasn't quite readable. He let you go, over the document delay. She didn't answer that. Make sure he drinks his chamomile in the evenings, she said instead. His blood pressure climbs when he skips it. And have someone check the vehicle bay cameras. The angle on bay 3 has been drifting since the last service. Whoever adjusted it went too far left. You've got a 3-meter blind spot near the stairwell door. Hugh stared at her. How do you know about the camera calibration? That's my department. I notice things, she said. She took the elevator down, the doors closed, and Evie Marsh slipped out of the Beckett Group tower into the grey Toronto morning like she'd never been there at all. 3 days without her was enough to understand what she had been. The replacement HR sent up was named Tanner, enthusiastic, thorough, deeply earnest, and functionally useless. He forwarded every call regardless of relevance. He scheduled a conflict into Roman's Thursday that Evie would have caught in 40 seconds. He put the wrong annex into the Portland's filing. He sent a maintenance request to a contractor whose insurance had lapsed in March, a detail Evie had apparently managed so quietly it had never needed to be said aloud while she was there. The office felt wrong. Roman couldn't locate the specific wrongness, only that it was everywhere. On Friday evening, after Tanner had gone, Roman found himself standing at Evie's old desk. The surface was clean. The drawers above the cabinet were empty, but when he pulled the bottom right drawer, it didn't move, locked. Roman found a steel letter opener and forced it. The cabinet splintered. Inside the drawer, there was no lost property, no forgotten personal item. There was a single black hardcover notebook with gridded pages. He opened it. The handwriting was small and architectural. No loops, no flourishes, pure function. Oct. 4, vehicle registered to Crane Capital Shell Company, Lakeshore Holdings, Corp. 1149782. Parked stationary at Bay 3 entrance for 3.1 hours. Driver did not leave vehicle. Plate cross-referenced. Registered keeper is a numbered company with director address matching Fletcher Crane's Rosedale property. Roman went cold. He turned the page. Oct. 19, catering supplier for Q3 leadership dinner, switched vendor at 48 hours notice. New vendor Meridian Events Services, registered Oct. 2 5 weeks ago. Director is Yusuf Crane, Fletcher Crane's nephew. Food prep team includes 2 individuals with no traceable employment history prior to 6 months ago. Redirected catering to backup supplier. Attributed substitution to supply chain delay in internal memo. He kept going. Noviv 3. Portland's addendum draft Tech 7 contains altered liability clause in section 12 BEB. Original clause caps Beckett Group exposure at 12%. Altered version removes cap entirely and introduces joint and several liability language. Alteration made after document left legal review, meaning change occurred in-house or in transit. Reverted to correct version before distribution. Matter not raised with Roman Beckett to avoid tipping off internal source. Roman set the notebook down. His hands were very still. She'd been running a one-woman intelligence operation from a property management desk on the 38th floor. She had never said a single word. Hugh, basement security room. Now. The security room was cool and blue-lit, smelling of server fans and floor wax. Hugh was already there when Roman arrived, standing behind a technician who had the distinct look of someone who hadn't slept in 2 days. "Tell him," Hugh said. The technician pulled up footage on the central monitor. The timestamp in the corner read, Wednesday, 13:41. The camera covered the service corridor on 38, a narrow L-shaped passage running behind the catering prep kitchen, used for building deliveries and maintenance access. Deserted during business hours, most days. At 13:41, Evie walked into frame from the left. She was carrying 3 document folders. Her stride was level. She was heading toward the stairwell to bring the documents up to 42. A man stepped out from the alcove behind the kitchen door. He was in a building maintenance uniform. He was not, based on the build, 230 pounds, neck like a structural column, any kind of maintenance worker. In his right hand was a suppressed compact pistol, leveled at Evie's chest. With his left, he gestured toward the stairwell, her access card. He wanted the floors above. Roman leaned forward in his chair. Evie didn't drop the folders. She didn't raise her hands. She didn't step back. She shifted her weight, a movement so fast the camera's frame rate turned it into a smear, and stepped toward him. Her left hand intercepted the gun arm at the wrist, driving the slide out of alignment with a precise downward pressure. Simultaneously, her right hand swung the spine of the document folders upward in a short, vicious arc that connected with the underside of the man's jaw. He staggered. She let go of his wrist, dropped the folders, grabbed the lapel of his uniform with both hands, and drove her weight into a leg sweep that dropped 230 pounds of muscle onto the corridor floor like a felled tree. She knelt. From the pocket of her blazer she produced a capped syringe. She administered it in a single motion. The man stopped moving. Evie stood up. She smoothed her blouse. She bent down, picked up the suppressed pistol, checked the chamber with a practiced one-handed rack, and put it in her bag. Then she grabbed the man by the collar and hauled him, through some precise mechanics of leverage and whatever she actually was, through the door of the adjacent mechanical room. She came back out. She picked up the folders. She looked down at her hair. One pin had come loose. She tucked it back. She took one long, slow breath. Then she walked to the stairwell door, pushed it open, and went up to 42. The 13:58. 17 minutes. The security room was very quiet. "The man in the mechanical room," Hugh said finally. "We found him 3 hours later when the cleaning crew opened the door. We thought he was a Crane Capital hire who got cold feet and drugged himself to disappear. He stopped. We never looked at what happened before." Roman stared at his own reflection in the dead monitor. He had fired a woman who had spent 17 minutes engaging a professional operative, neutralizing him, hiding the body, and recovering the documents, and then walked into a boardroom and placed those documents on his desk without a single visible tremor. He had yelled at her for being late. "There's more," Hugh said. A second file loaded. Exterior, street level outside Roman's Rosedale address. Timestamp, November 14th, 2:17 a.m. A figure in dark clothing was lying under Roman's parked car, an armored Cadillac SUV, working with practiced speed near the wheel assembly. The movements were not a mechanic's. A second figure approached from the right of frame. Wool coat, slim bag over one shoulder. When the figure under the car rolled out and drew a blade, she didn't break stride. She reached into the bag and produced an extendable baton and delivered a single strike to the man's knee. Not his body, not his head. His knee with the precise, considered violence of someone who knew exactly which joint to end a fight with. He went down. She crouched by the car. She examined the damage. She produced a small toolkit and spent 14 minutes making a repair that would survive the drive to the shop the next morning. Well enough to get the vehicle off the road safely, not well enough to hide that something had happened at all. She finished. She stood. She walked away into the November dark. The coat, the posture, the particular stillness of the hands at her sides. Evie Marsh. Roman placed both palms flat on the console in front of him. She had saved him twice, quietly, without credit, without hazard pay, without saying a single word across 2 years of catered lunches and property management emails and $17 million of development contracts. Find her, he said. His voice didn't sound like his own. We tried, Hugh said. Her address on file is empty. Landlord says she cleared out the same morning you let her go. Cash settlement on the lease. No forwarding address, no contact number. Her employment records go back 2 years and stop. Before that, nothing. Her references are inactive numbers. He set a thin folder on the console. She doesn't exist under that name. Everything she gave us in onboarding was constructed. Roman looked at the folder. Then he looked at the notebook in his other hand, the tiny, precise handwriting that had, for 2 years, tracked threats against him that he had never known existed. Tear the city apart, he said quietly. Check transit, the airports, the ferry terminal. Pull every contact we have at the city. Pull the traffic grid. He walked out of the security room. Somewhere in Toronto, the invisible woman was gone. And for the first time in 20 years, Roman Beckett felt the specific, stomach-dropping sensation of being genuinely unprotected. It took 72 hours for Fletcher Crane to make his move. Roman had known it was coming. The Portland's acquisition had closed, the contracts were signed, and Crane had lost. Men like Crane didn't absorb losses, they redirected them. Roman had doubled his personal security and rerouted his schedule, but Crane was patient and well-funded, and the hit came not at his office or his home but in the private parking lane behind a King West restaurant he had attended a dozen times without incident. The 2 men who followed him out were professionals, not the kind Crane usually hired. These were imported, careful, and they knew exactly how much time they had before the restaurant's security rotation completed its circuit. Roman had a driver, he had 1 armed guard. Neither made it to him in time. He was in the lane with his back to a loading bay door, and 2 weapons trained on him when the nearest lamp above the service exit exploded in a shower of sparks, dropping the entire lane into shadow. A figure dropped from the fire escape above the nearer man. She didn't announce herself. There was no pause, no warning. She landed behind him, 1 arm locked across his neck in a chokehold that had him unconscious in under 4 seconds. The second man spun, weapon up, and she was already moving, ducking under his arm, controlling the gun hand, while the heel of her other palm drove into his nose in a strike that put him on the pavement. She stood over both men. She wasn't breathing hard. She looked at Roman. "You're terrible at varying your routes," she said. Her voice was exactly as he remembered it, level, minimal, faintly dry. Roman lowered the hand he'd raised in useless self-defense. He looked at the 2 unconscious men, then at the woman standing between him and them, in dark clothing with her hair pulled back and a thin cut across 1 cheekbone she hadn't bothered to address. "Evie. You have a car 2 blocks north," she said. "Take it. Don't use your regular driver for the next 10 days. She turned to go. Wait. Not to intimidate. She was not a person who could be intimidated, and some part of him had always known that, without having the framework to understand it. Hugh pulled your file. Your real file. You don't exist. She stopped. She didn't turn around yet. Who are you? A long pause. Somewhere over the lake, a siren, the distant clatter of a streetcar on King. She turned. My name is Evie Marsh, she said. That part is real. And the rest? She considered him for a moment. Then something in the discipline of her face eased by a single degree. I spent 6 years as a financial crimes investigator with the RCMP, she said. I ran undercover operations targeting shell company networks used to launder construction contract revenue. Crane Capital was one of 3 firms I was building a case on. 18 months ago, my cover was compromised. Someone inside the operation sold my identity to Crane's legal team. I was pulled off the file, disavowed, and left to manage the fallout alone. Roman said nothing. He waited. Crane's network had been running money through legitimate development companies, including yours, she continued. Your firm was a clean vehicle. You didn't know. But if Crane ever needed leverage, your financial entanglement with his shell structures would have been enough to end you. I needed to get inside and remove those connections before he could weaponize them. The property services role gave me access to every document flow in and out of the building. You spent 2 years protecting my company from the inside, Roman said, while also managing 17 active building leases, 6 contractor relationships, and your catering logistics. A beat. I'm efficient. Your brother, he said, the medical claims on your benefits account. We pulled those when we ran the file. Cardiac condition. Ongoing. Something moved across her face, the first real crack in the composure, and it was small, almost invisible, but it was there. Toby, she said. He's 19. The coverage was the reason I stayed as long as I did. The job had the right benefits package. Had. He's been stable for 4 months. He doesn't need the same level of intervention he did when I took the position. Her voice was even. She had clearly rehearsed being even about this. Roman looked at her for a long moment, at the cut on her cheekbone, at the steady hands and the level eyes and the two unconscious men on the wet pavement behind her. You didn't tell me. He's about any of it. After the first time you stopped a threat, you could have come to me. You would have weaponized me, she said plainly, and something in her voice was not unkind. It was simply accurate. You operate through leverage, Mr. Beckett. If you had known what I was capable of, I would have become an asset you managed, pointed in whatever direction you chose. I would have stopped being effective. The invisibility was the entire mechanism. He knew she was right. It stung in the way that only true things could. And then I fired you, he said. You terminated my employment, she corrected, which released me from the position. My obligation was discharged. A pause, and yet here we are. And yet here we are, he agreed. He reached into his coat. He had been carrying the notebook since he left the security room. He hadn't fully understood why until this moment. He held it out to her. She looked at it, then at him. Crane isn't finished, Roman said. The Portland's deal closing made him desperate. He'll try again, not just at me, at the filing. He still has people inside City Hall who can contest the development approval on procedural grounds. If he can create the appearance of impropriety in the acquisition process, he can delay or kill the project and force a retender. He paused. I have lawyers and I have security. What I don't have is someone who already knows exactly where his pressure points are. Evie was quiet for a moment. The city moved around them, the low hum of a generator, a light changing on a wet street, November pressing in at the edges of the dark. There's a numbered company Crane uses to move money through the Ontario Heritage Property Registry, she said slowly. It's not in the notebook. I didn't finish that thread before Wednesday. If someone pulled the corporate registry filings for the last 18 months and cross-referenced the director addresses with Crane Capital's known shell network, you'd have enough to take to the OSC. Enough to freeze his development financing for 2 years, minimum. Can you finish it? She looked at him. The faintest thing happened at the corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile, but the beginning of the architecture of one. I charge consulting rates, she said. Current market, not what you were paying me. Done. And I won't be managing the catering schedule. I wouldn't ask. Or the building leases. Evie. He said her name quietly, not as a command, not as a plea, as something closer to acknowledgement. I'm not asking you to come back as my property manager. I'm asking you to work with me, at the table, with everything you actually are, not the version you performed for 2 years. She studied him with the same calculation she had used to study every threat that had passed through the 38th floor. She measured, she weighed, she considered. Then she held out her hand. Roman took it. They shook, standing in a wet service lane on a November night, over 2 unconscious men and 2 years of secrets neither of them had said out loud. I'll need access to the corporate registry portal by morning, she said, already turning toward the street. You'll have it. And someone should look at that Bay 3 camera angle, she added, without breaking stride. Hugh still hasn't fixed it. Roman watched her walk away into the city. She didn't look back. She moved with the particular, contained certainty of someone who had never needed to, because she always knew exactly what was behind her. He had spent 20 years building an empire on the belief that power announced itself, that it wore good suits and held rooms and made itself impossible to ignore. He had been wrong. The most effective force in his building had been the woman with the slim black binder who had never once needed anyone to notice she was there. She had kept him alive in the dark, and now for the first time, she would do it in the light. Fletcher Crane had spent 18 months underestimating the woman, quietly dismantling his network from 38 floors above Bay Street. He was about to find out what happened when she stopped hiding.